I remember the hype surrounding Octopath Traveler. I was nearly done with high school, ready to move to a new town to attend college, and started gaining a real affinity and appreciation for retro JRPGs. It was during this time Square decided to let everyone see the very specific project they had on the horizon. Said everyone lost their collective marbles. Squaresoft and Enix had built their reputation on traditional JRPGs from the late 80s into the early 2000s, but when they merged into Square Enix, the amount of titles in that vein just kind of dried up. While factors like increased development time and shifting markets certainly played a role in this, it was a shame to see pioneers of a genre effectively ignore it. Still, the handheld scene was keeping the spirit alive, and Bravely Default did pretty alright. So for one reason or another, Square decided to give home console JRPGs another swing for the new generation. With its striking visual design, gorgeous soundtrack, and innovative gameplay, it looked like everything fans of old school JRPGs could want. Despite originally being exclusive to the Switch, it went on to sell 1 million units within a month, at least 3 million by its 4th anniversary, and was even the game that made me buy the console itself. I even bought the collector's edition of the game, which is probably one of the coolest pieces in my collection. For me, finally gaining an affinity for the genre, having heard about how great old Square RPGs were for years, this seemed like the perfect game for me at the time. Until I played it, and it wasn't quite what I wanted. It wasn't a bad experience, but there was something about it that left me feeling disappointed among everyone else's fervor, which isn't to say I think the game is bad. It's done a lot for JRPGs as a whole in the past 8 years, creating a distinct visual style that's gone on to be the standard for old school style titles, gave a boon to retro revivals and throwbacks, provided financial incentive for Square to remake their old titles and start new ones, and went on to make some truly solid sequels. Plus, I only get one chance to discuss its 8-year anniversary, and I'm not missing that. Now that I've had a chance to revisit this game, it's safe to say it's probably the best tech demo that's ever cost full price. We might as well begin with the most recognizable aspect of Octopath, the presentation. When Tomoyo Asano and his team were crafting a visual style that fit the game's purpose, they crafted what's been dubbed HD 2D. This term was coined to describe the specific combinations of 2D pixel sprites moving and interacting in a lower polygon 3D world that still has pixelated textures. To add more modern pizzazz, it incorporates rendering effects like depth of field and dynamic lighting. Things look blurry the further they are. What a concept. Everything added together makes the game look not like an old game came to life, but became a diorama, or perhaps a tabletop RPG setup harkening back to the genre's inspirations, which is probably why this collector's edition has this awesome little pop-up book showing the character's starting points. This is what the game actually looks like, and it's amazing in terms of visual innovation. Plus, it probably costs a lot less money to do this than making everything hyper-realistic with individually rendered hair strands. Yeah, remember when Square did that? Would you believe me if I said they were disappointed with that game's sales? The HD 2D style is honestly a perfect bridge between classic 16-bit pixel art and more modern standards, by which I mean there's a lot of bloom, but the sprites look oddly natural in the setting. It even manages to be a minor callback to some titles of the PS1 era, like Thousand Arms or Square's own Final Fantasy Tactics, where they didn't have the horsepower to render everything in glorious, pointy 3D. It's a fresh take on nostalgia, which, at least in my mind, epitomizes the idea of a retro throwback. Some of these environments are genuinely gorgeous to look at, with the subtle shifting of trees and grass or the glittering of stark white snow contrasted with the dark sky above. Octopath Traveler is very atmospheric when you're just getting from place to place, although it does feel a little on the nose when the different sections are named like, Mario zones. Hey, what should we call the place with all the oceans and coastline? The coastlands. And the place with all the woods? The woodlands. Brilliant! I also find it hilarious when you move from one region to the other because they just immediately shift entire biomes. Like, it's just such a harsh line. It's like they're saying, 9! Snow can only exist within the designated area! I have a German friend, I'm allowed to use that accent. I know some people got a bit burnt out seeing this when Square was really trying to push it, but I'm glad they introduced the style. In the 8 years since, it's not only been used for the other games in the series, but also the remakes of Live Alive and Dragon Quest 1 through 3, plus other new titles like Triangle Strategy and The Adventures of Elliot. Even smaller teams have used the style, like with Eiyuden Chronicles and Wandering Sword, and the next iteration of RPG Maker will have it as a visual option. Not only is this aesthetic good good, it's one that's still being improved upon and tinkered with. If nothing else, Octopath should be praised for pioneering a strong visual aesthetic that's a near perfect blend of modern and retro, which is more than I can say for the story. The premise of Octopath Traveler is clear from the title, being closer to a collection of short stories focusing on different characters rather than having one big story about a team of 8. And because this game is nothing if not adamant, the first letter of each character's name spells out Octopath, and they're lined up in clockwise order, which is very, very cute, and I appreciate it. So who's first in line? They'll be my leader for this play. Dang it. Alright, let's get each story out of the way, since they're all intentionally very simple. Ophelia is a quiet, friendly girl living in the central church at Flamesgrace with her adoptive father and sister who are just as milquetoast as her. As said father starts exhibiting symptoms of unspecific cough disease, Ophelia takes it upon herself to carry out a tradition known as the Kindling, where a chosen member of the church relights the sacred flames in 4 churches across the continent. Cyrus is an esteemed professor at the Royal Academy in Atlasdam who is also terrible with women. While looking into the super secret archive, he discovers some tomes are missing, which can only mean one thing. Someone is very behind on their late fees. Or they were stolen. Probably that. With dangers untold on the horizon, he sets out to find the infamous tome from the far reaches of hell. That doesn't sound that bad. Tressa is a peppy young girl working for her family shop in Rippletide who dreams of being a great merchant. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like corporatism has taken a hold of the continent, so she will be spared when the revolution comes. After an encounter with some pirates, she finds a half-finished journal and proclaims she'll fill out the rest with her own merchant adventures and maybe make some cash along the way. Ulberic is an old warrior at the ripe, ancient age of 35 who used to serve the King of Hornburg. Bad things happened in Hornburg, as evidenced by it being gone now, and he's hiding out in the tiny village of Cobbleston. Really? That's what they called it? After fighting an old colleague of an old frenemy, he decides to seek out said frenemy and relight his resolve for combat, because honor or something, I guess. Primrose is a former noble who's been working as a dancer for a very creepy man in the town of Sunshade, hoping to find clues on the people who killed her father so she can seek bloody vengeance. After her only friend is killed by their boss, she returns the favor and starts following a lead for the first of her 3 targets. Oh? No jokes here? I mean, that's fine, but it's a bit inconsistent. Alphen is a rookie apothecary in the town of Clearbrook. Wow, these names are getting worse. After curing his friend's young sister of venom, he decides to introduce everyone to the wonderful possibility of socialized healthcare. Therion is a lone wolf master thief who totally listens to 3 Days Grace. While breaking into a noble mansion, he has an encounter with the mansion's butler and is forced to wear a special bracelet marking his failure. And since foolish pride is alive and well here, he's told it'll be removed if he can steal the noble family's missing dragonstones. Finally, Hannet is a hunter in the village of Swarky, which would be an absolute heaven for quirky Facebook moms with their love of unneeded apostrophes and double vowels. Her uncouth master left on a hunt quite some time ago, but his companion has returned on their own. So Hannet decides to track him down and drag him back from either danger or whatever pub he's drinking dry. Okay, got all that? Good, because that's it. What, were you expecting more? Well, you won't be getting much in terms of direct narrative, or narrative in general, because Octopath has a very specific point to this structure, a point I personally find very unfulfilling and also kind of disingenuous to the supposed purpose of the game. Now, none of these stories are necessarily bad, but that's mostly because they're purely functional and without much material to criticize in the first place. Those premises are really the entire stories for these characters, from chapters 1 to 4, and very little actually happens in said stories to flesh them out in interesting ways. Admittedly, I do find myself more interested in their small details than when I first played the game, but not enough to make up for what I believe are the 2 biggest problems with OT's narratives. First, just the general lack of story in the first place. Each chapter basically goes as follows. Go to a specified town, find the local jerk, go through the cave or a mansion, fight a boss battle for 20 to 30 minutes or until golden brown. The locals always say, "Oh, that guy's such a jerk, random traveler, but I can't ask you, a stranger, to help in our plight." And then whatever character is the focus goes, "Yeah, but I'm going to do that thing because I smell a boss fight." Frankly, it's repetitive. I suppose it is only as big a deal as you make it, but it does cause the chapters to feel samey, which is made worse by the second problem I have. Everything is so disconnected. This is probably the most common complaint I've heard about the game's plot because the original pitch of the game in 2017 made it sound a bit different than it really is. I'm not the only one who thought Octopath Traveler would be about 8 travelers on one grand adventure where the stories overlap in fun ways, but that's not how it works at all. This is 8 isolated stories that only converge if you get the obnoxious secret ending that I've never gotten because screw that noise. Every party member is alone in their plot lines despite the canon knowledge as they're traveling with 7 other distinct personalities that might add some fun contrast or commentary. This isn't about a group of adventurers growing close as friends as they battle through hardships, the anime cheese I want poured over me as I lay in bed. This is 8 instances of someone dragging 7 nondescript bodies around because they wanted an audience. It just comes across like a very overly mechanical kind of story where everything's just functional enough to give you a bit of context without developing it into anything special or very engaging. And that in itself is made worse by the fact that the pacing is horrible because you have to keep rotating chapters and the chapters have such little content that by the time you get through 7 other chapters, you just forget everything that was going on. Maybe the simple premises are meant to alleviate that problem, but if you're having a problem with pacing, the solution isn't to make the stories themselves worse. Think back to some of the great SNES JRPGs of olden times, which is the mission statement of Octopath. Yes, the battles could be exhilarating, and the concept of exploring such a vast world was intoxicating, but wasn't the whole point of them to tell you a compelling story? Earthbound with its absurdity, but ending in a battle like Gygus, Chrono Trigger taking you to a plethora of different unique time periods and even killing the main character, Final Fantasy VI having Kefka win and letting you marinate in a seemingly hopeless world before gathering your friends to make everything right. Their stories evolved and grew, becoming so much more than their beginnings would have you believe. That's the period Octopath Traveler most wants to call back to, like 70% of all indie games and their dog's china cabinet. But this approach to storytelling makes it so much less impactful and satisfying. Granted, the stories being small scale leads to a nice feel of isolation from the rest of the world, like the things you're doing only matter to them and the people they meet along the way, rather than knowingly preventing some world-ending threat. The characters are just going about their own problems, and whether or not they fail is important only to them, to varying degrees. I mean, Cyrus getting the book back is probably pretty important, but Tressa? Girl's just trying to make some scratch. Very blue-collar in a way. Yeehaw. Another reason as to why the true ending is stupid, because it makes the grounded journeys feel more orchestrated and contrived, trying to connect them all together by just saying, "Oh yeah, God's angry because this is a JRPG, and we really didn't try very hard." But ignoring that, which I will, the stories in Octopath are at least charmingly down to earth in terms of fantasy. But even in that, they all feel like things we've seen before in so many titles, only played completely straight as the central focus. They never really evolve beyond what you get in their respective first chapters, which isn't why people remember those classic stories. What are Ophelia's and Therion's stories but lesser takes on the restoring crystals plot from Final Fantasy I? Alphen doesn't even really have a goal, he's just kind of wandering around. But that does remind me of Ginkgo in Mushishi, so I'll give him a pass, just barely. These kinds of cliches aren't why people loved old JRPG stories, it was the narrative that happened to include them. We've seen these plot points many times before. Shouldn't the drive be to improve, innovate, or at least polish the concepts? Or maybe it would be more interesting to have the stories lean more heavily on the travelers themselves. Imagine if Therion, while stealing back the Dragonstones, also learned to regain his trust in others through his interactions with the wholesome Alphen. Or maybe Ophelia could help Ulberic come to terms with what happened to the King of Hornburg. Primrose and Honnet could date. I think they'd make a great couple. Maybe the stories would be better if the party members themselves were more than just stereotypes for their jobs. You heard being married to your job? How about being written around it? Therion's a thief, so he's guarded and cautious, but also a bit cocky because he knows he can outfox most people. Ulberic's an old grizzled warrior, so he just has to be stoic and all about that honor. Ophelia is really just the textbook idea of a white mage girl. Alfin is an apothecary, so he is, by scientific terms, a wholesome being, and that's about all he has going for him. Am I the only one who thinks it's weird how dry their characters are? They're just lacking in sauce or personality to make them stand out as more than the thief guy, the merchant lady, the scholar man, etc. The party feels less like a band of adventurers and more like a list of archetypes in an old TTRPG book written by committee. The best one is Primrose because she's essentially the fantasy equivalent of a Las Vegas stripper, and that's a fascinating premise for a character we just don't see much in JRPGs. She also gets the best story, if only because revenge plots are inherently somewhat compelling, and they don't try punking out with the whole revenge isn't the answer because it perpetuates a cycle of violence. Nah, she just stabs them because screw those guys. Honestly, props for that. The most personality they get is when banter pops up, which are basically skits from the Tales series. After most story cutscenes, this little prompt appears if you have the appropriate characters in your party. They'll be taken to the interaction dimension and just stand around and talk, comment on what's happened, chat a bit, maybe flirt, just add a little tidbit about who they are. While I do like these segments, I really wish they presented them in the overworld to help them feel more organic. Again, it just feels really disconnected from everything else. Maybe they didn't do that because you have the chance to see more by swapping out characters. I guess I can understand that, but no matter how many I saw, I can't help but feel they were all written around their roles in the job system and the other mechanics, which are pretty fantastic. If Octopath's story and characters are lacking, which I say they are, it might seem curious how it got so popular. A part of that was undoubtedly the novelty of a new traditional JRPG coming from Square Enix. But novelty can only get one so far, and once the flash of curiosity wears off, it would reasonably die off. Fortunately, Octopath's real strength is revealed when you actually get past that initial spark and start playing. Its core gameplay is rock solid. The basis being the typical menu-driven combat system that reigns above all with its undeniable superiority, and it has 3 systems stacked on top of it like lovely fillings in a wonderful cake. Those systems being shields, boost points, and the aforementioned job system, all of which flop and intertwine with each other in ways that make for an incredibly satisfying play experience. First of all, boosts and shields. Every enemy in the game has a certain number of shields and a mysterious list right next to the number when you first encounter them. By striking them with any weapon or element they're weak against, you'll reduce their shields by 1 per hit, and when they run out,
flames, burn this away!
Man, that's such a good sound. Everyone give a round of applause to the sound design. Thank you. Once an enemy breaks, you have 1 round of turns, shown by the little track up top, where they can't act and take massively increased damage before regaining their shields at the end of the round. This works in tandem with the boost system. Each party member starts with a single boost point, or BP, and gets another one each round, so long as you didn't spend any on the previous turn. You can pump up to 3 BP into an action to make the opponent know they done screwed up real bad. This results in either extra basic attacks to rapidly reduce shields, or just making one skill several times more powerful. The difference between damage in a regular skill and the same skill fully boosted is, quite frankly, stupid, and the smartest aspect of the design. The combination of shield breaking and boosting does make a lot of fights fall into a pattern, breaking someone's legs before punching them in the face, if you will, which I understand might be dull to some people. Slowly wearing down enemies before supercharging a massive spell or big weapon swing is a very satisfying process because it leads up to a wonderful bang that doesn't get old even after dozens and dozens of battles. Also, the little lines when boosting are charming, and that goes a long way because I say so.
Here I go!
Now the true lesson begins.
I won't hold back!
My blade is unbending!
Yeah. Watch me now!
Let's get down to work!
I'm ready. Are you?
Holding back nothing.
By the way, if you'd like to hear me say other things and you've made it this far, so I'm assuming you might, maybe click that subscribe button and all that other hooey YouTube likes. I also have a Discord server and a Blue Sky where I share cute artwork I find on the interwebs, and a Patreon if you feel the spirit of unbridled generosity towards a random stranger such as myself. All of this is down in the description sorry for the interruption. Now, about that job system I mentioned. Each character has their default primary job like it's ingrained in their DNA. However, if someone else wants to take a stab at being a thief or a dancer, there are job shrines scattered across the lands. Finding one lets you assign it as a secondary job for a character, giving them expanded movesets through the power of fancy new clothes. It isn't nearly as expansive or experimental or just plain mental as the job system in Bravely Default. That was a Willy Wonka's all-you-can-kill buffet of combinations and abilities, but Octopath is a good deal more focused. All the jobs in Octopath can be laid on a 2-axis chart of support to offense and elemental to weapon. Having a variety of jobs at any time is the best way to break shields and curb stomp enemies you come across, so you want to have party members rotate jobs while you swap them about. While there are definitely stronger combinations than others, like making Ol Beric an axe-swinging tank that can also heal as an apothecary, or turning Hanit into an armory-toting warrior, there's certainly plenty of room for personalization. I made Ophelia a scholar, which I know isn't great for weapon diversity, but I value having a variety of elemental skills at all times. Plus, since I'm stuck with her, it's nice to give her more offensive ability. And thankfully, this game avoids the problem I have with so many other job systems, cough, cough, Atlas, cough, unconvincing, cough, where a job or skill system just means everyone is eventually able to do everything. It always strikes me as disappointing because the developers eschew the playable characterization of unique skill growth for your party members in the name of flexibility, or some such nonsense. Yes, you can eventually make every character learn everything, but that'd be kind of redundant because they can only use the abilities of the jobs they have equipped, and secondary jobs can only be equipped to one character at a time. Plus, they at least have their own unique talents, not all of which are combat related, like Therion being able to open purple chests, but most still differentiate characters from one another by more than just stats, which is something I always appreciate, even if it's small. Cyrus learns a weakness right away, Alphen brews different medicines or poison, Hanit's whole gimmick is a mini creature catcher, which explains why I barely used it. No matter what combination you pick, each character will still feel at least a bit unique. Oh, and while characters don't retain all the skills they learned when switching secondary jobs, they do keep any support abilities unlocked across jobs. Like if a blacksmith became a cook, they'd probably be pretty good at tenderizing meat. Right? That makes sense to me. Most can feel a bit underwhelming, but giving your healers the show must go on so their support abilities are better, or Fleetfoot on a dancer so they act first and pump up a character, or giving a Rune Lord second serving so they hit again for different elements, it's a great way to make sure the time characters spend learning a second trade is still useful when they change to something else. Wait, Rune Lord? That's not a job, you filthy lying cur! Well, it is a job, you rude person. It's just one you have to work for. Along with the 8 regular job shrines of cleric, scholar, merchant, warrior, dancer, apothecary, thief, and hunter, there are 4 advanced job shrines containing the most broken classes in the entire game. Sealed behind 4 tough boss fights with their associated patron gods are the jobs of Sorcerer, Starseer, Rune Lord, and War Master. Sorcerer, blessed by the god Draysang, is the ultimate magic wielder, capable of casting triple striking spells of each element. The Starseer, blessed by Steora, bolsters allies far more than any base class and even grants multiple boons at once. Rune Lord, blessed by Balagar, is another support class, but with a twist of granting the user additional elemental strikes on top of their basic attacks, ensuring faster breaks and higher damage. Finally, War Master, granted by Winhild, is the strongest physical powerhouse with the ability to wield every weapon type in the game. Obtaining these is challenging, but they're a fantastic reward for going the extra mile, giving you even more potential combinations for your party, more materials to experiment with, more of the system to think about. Getting new jobs, especially the hidden ones, makes experimentation and growth very satisfying. I'm sorry, how much damage is that? They made sure getting powerful and figuring out ways to be powerful were very fulfilling, which is a great mark of any JRPG. This is the reason Octopath is still a solid game to play, despite not having a deep story or cast to discuss. JRPGs are usually carried by their stories, but there certainly are exceptions for mechanics-forward games like OT. Star Ocean springs to mind, maybe just because that was the last review, but still. If you played and enjoyed this game, it's probably because the gameplay hooked you after the initial novelty of the premise. I'm willing to bet 1 leaf on it. Yeah, the currency is just called leaves. Bit confusing? Is this a pun about money growing on trees? Was that the joke? And that gameplay wasn't just rooted in combat. There's fun in just visiting new towns and using the character's path actions. These are something promoted quite heavily in the trailers leading up to release, and they're genuinely another good addition to the traditional JRPG format. These path actions give a good reason to explore around, poking into nooks and crannies, and even using them to solve the many side quests in the game. The side quests have the same issue as the main plots, but you get good rewards for them, and there are a few chains of requests telling longer stories throughout the game to flesh out the world a bit more. Combat gives you a sense of power, the job system gives you a sense of experimentation, and exploration gives you a sense of the world. I think all of these mixing together is the real appeal of Octopath Traveler 1. Of course, what discussion of this game would be complete without covering the soundtrack? Do you like how I started by covering the visuals, and now the last section is the music? You know, talking about the major aspects of presentation at the beginning and end? That's some kind of essay technique right there. Maybe. Probably. Perhaps. I totally know what I'm doing. But yes, the soundtrack of Octopath is arguably a stronger element of presentation than the iconic visuals. The character themes alone have so much thought put into them since they're meant to represent each traveler, and honestly do a much better job than the actual dialogue of bringing across their defining traits. Ophelia's track has this gentle, calming presence, like a warm beam of sunshine to reflect her selfless and caring nature. Old Barracks is a mix of heavy tones from both the guilt of his past and his internal sense of justice, combining to form a marching theme for one lone warrior. Primrose's tune does a fantastic job at bringing across her sense of melancholy for her lot in life, yet it's still exotic and mysterious. Why is the composer doing a better job at characterization than the writers? They even give a clearer identity to the world. Some of these overworld themes are genuinely beautiful. The Riverland song is honestly one of the most gorgeous pieces of music I've heard in the JRPG. It's so serene and reflective, and it really puts me in the state of mind I get from actually walking through nature. Not only do all 8 sections of the continent get a song, so do most of the story-relevant towns, most of the boss fights, and the moments before a character fights a boss. And we can't forget that battle theme, epic and iconic despite hearing it hundreds of times over the course of a playthrough. But if I played every song I love from this game, it'd double the length of the video. All in all, it's a great bow to wrap up the entirety of the game. So with all that in mind, is Octopath Traveler a good game? I don't think that's the important question to ask. The better question is, did Octopath Traveler fulfill its purpose? I know asking that usually carries many connotations of the meaning behind art and the spirit of creation for creation's sake, but this is Square Enix. They did not make this game because a little hopeful team had a burning desire within their souls to bring it into existence. This was purely a business decision. I don't know who in the big chair upstairs told Tomoya Asano to make Octopath Traveler, but I'm willing to bet money it wasn't because they were funding auteurism. No, I think it's safe to say Octopath was born out of a minor gamble that everyone kind of knew the answer to. Do people really still want console JRPGs in the classic style enough to the point that kind of project would be profitable? Does the outcry of people asking for returns to form translate into fat stacks of lettuce? That sweet almighty yen, cold, hard, casheroni? It's ultimately less of a wondrous, fantastical journey and more a foot in the door, a toe dipped in the water, a canary in the coal mine, a test. Mechanically, visually, audibly, the game is fantastic. Those are qualities that can be easily replicated, and likely for much less than making full-scale new engines nobody ever cared about. When I arrived at that conclusion, suddenly the narratives being so blasé made a lot more sense. They were playing the hits fans wanted to hear, but just borrowing the surface-level cliches to replicate what people remember of old JRPGs. The rest of the game is what mattered. They're the elements Square could duplicate for further projects, which they did. In 2022, we got the remake of Live Alive and Triangle Strategy, not to mention the much better Octopath 2 the following year. Would any of those have happened without the original proving a success, showing there was indeed money to be made by producing games in the style? No! No, they wouldn't have. Video games on the macro scale are primarily a business. Nothing happens without the incentive for profit. If Octopath 1 failed, we wouldn't have gotten the other retro-styled games by Square, we wouldn't have the HD 2D style as proliferated as it's become, and we certainly wouldn't have gotten the genuinely amazing sequel, which is much better and improved it literally every single way. Go play Octopath Traveler 2, don't even worry about this one, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. If I look at this title as a game to play, I give it 2 thumbs up and a bag of chips, but a game can be much more than that. It can be surprising, inspiring, thought-provoking, and enlightening. It can be Wild Arms. I have to bring it up at least once a video, okay? I might have a problem. Octopath might be made in the visage of renowned classics, but it's a modern game through and through. It can't stack up to the likes of Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasies of yore. Things made in imitation just can't surpass originals because we've seen it before. Octopath is a very well-made effigy. Still, that doesn't mean the game is necessarily bad, and the results of it have been generally pretty solid, so I'd say its purpose was indeed fulfilled. It did its job. See what I did there? Am I likely to return to Octopath Traveler when the developers have already improved upon it? No, it's just too lacking in what I'm wanting from my JRPGs, which tends to be narrative and characters. Am I glad it exists? Certainly. I think it's safe to say 8 years down the road, Octopath has proven itself to be a great event for the genre, even if it isn't a particularly amazing example of what makes JRPGs so wonderful. It was fun to look back and see how far the legacy has gotten, though. I don't regret picking the game up on launch day, because I remember how I felt about the game when it was being shown off. I remember how I felt finally getting to play it on launch day. I remember opening the box and seeing all the fun goodies they packed in it. I remember almost everyone loving it. So even with all its faults I think it has, I must admit, Octopath Traveler did its job. And it did its job very well. Thank you oh so very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, and I'm assuming you did because you're hearing this message right now, I just want to give another reminder to subscribe if you want to hear me talk about more JRPGs, obviously more older stuff. This was just something I did because, hey, 8th anniversary, hopefully I made it in time. And if you extra super appreciated the video, maybe go check out the Discord, that's totally free. And again, I do have a Patreon, and maybe you'd like to join the highest tier of auspicious alchemists like Nightmare Alpha. Thank you very much for your support. But no matter what you choose to do, I'm just very happy that you watched this far. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in the next one.